Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Lynn Smith, as I was just graciously introduced. I am indeed a mother, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. I'm in Memphis. During the day, I'm also an economic developer. I'm here today to discuss the exact thing you just heard, which is the value of discomfort. On days like today, where we're in search of the power of X, that thing that will drive us, that will guide us, that will lead us to the next extraordinary change, I am filled with hope. I am also, however, filled with extraordinary discomfort. A discomfort for speaking in front of all of these glorious faces who I feel are friendly, but yet are many. And a discomfort about the way the world still exists. At the end of this talk, I hope you'll find a willingness to join me in discomfort and will accept the invitation that follows. My sort of journey to discomfort was first introduced to me in a poem. It's written by this glorious Native American poet named Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And the name of the poem is not so coincidentally called The Invitation. It's a very long poem, but I will recite for you a part of it that I think is particularly important today. It does not matter to me how you come to be here. I don't care who you know, where you've studied, or why you find yourself in your current situation. I want to know if you will sit in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. I want to know if you will sit in pain, mine or your own, and not hurry to hide it or fade it or fix it. That poem really hit home with me during a conference I attended many years back, 2010 or 11. I am blessed as a result of the work I did in Detroit and now do in Memphis around economic development and access to opportunities that accrue to the benefit of cities like ours, to attend a variety of conferences around the country where I get to learn from the smartest people in the world. This particular conference was about race and the struggles of race and inequity and our sort of misunderstandings between one another. The room was filled. It was a 3-day conference. It was wrought with really deep and raw conversations. And at the end of the second day, we found ourselves having conversations about our own unique experiences in the skin we wear every day. Native Americans, African Americans, white people, immigrants, the whole variety of folks, sharing and understanding or not understanding candidly, a room filled with being seated in discomfort. And I shared a story that I wanted to sort of unpack with my colleagues in that room about having been in a economic development forum as the only white person among a variety of black people, and sort of the anxiety that occurred as someone who was trying to bring resources into that environment. And it was a really sort of itchy, scratchy conversation. And it led to a conversation about the things we just don't understand about our lived experiences. And this beautiful black woman rose and started to try and, I think, melt it down for us into something that was deeply personal and about which we could relate. And she said this: how many times have you had to talk to your son about how to behave if he's approached by the police? And I thought, what is that? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what that means. And she said it again. How many times have you had to talk to your son about what to say if he's approached by the police so he's not arrested or even maybe shot? Now, this was 6 or 7 years ago, guys, not last week. And I stammered and struggled to try and find the words. And she said, how many times do you talk to your son about how to behave if he's approached by the police so he's not arrested or shot or even killed? And I rushed to try and come up with some answer, right? That was going to be more productive than none, which is the answer, by the way, none. Never to that point and never since. And realizing that I think what she was saying to me was that was a different experience than the one she was having. And so I started stammering like a fool to try and explain, and she stopped me and said, please, just sit. Just sit with me for a minute. And so I did. And she asked me as I sat to consider this. I have that conversation with my son every single time he leaves the house. Every single time he leaves the house, I pray he comes home alive. Now, this wasn't a conversation about blame or solution or reconciliation. This was a conversation from one mom to another, living a different experience simply because of the color of their skin. And it was powerful. It was powerful because it forced me to get out of the comfort of my age-old narrative that suggested I understood so many things about my lived experience in race in America and recognized that I, in fact, did not. And so I sat, and I let it just change me, change the way I thought about the world. And I let it change the way I talked about the things I thought I knew and wish I'd known and was afraid of and was uncomfortable about. And I sat and thought about how I didn't need to rush to a solution, just be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I probably became less interesting at dinner because I talked about this a lot and challenged our assumptions about what we thought we knew, but we didn't. I probably became less fun at parties because I was always challenging the way we thought about things. And I definitely became a bit of a problem at work, where I started challenging all of the assumptions about economic development and tried and true strategies that were designed to bring access and opportunity to cities that were actually failing. And we knew we were failing because the numbers weren't changing. And I tried to honor my discomfort and my new awareness by bringing a different set of thinking to the work we were doing. Mine is a tale of two cities. You heard I grew up in Detroit. You can hear by my voice that I'm not from here. I hear that pretty regularly, and I think I've only managed thus to pick up y'all a little bit. I moved here from Detroit to Memphis. There's a familiar refrain about how Memphis isn't Detroit and Detroit isn't Memphis, but we are in fact very similar in so many ways. We're different, of course, and we could talk about that for hours and hours, but we're sort of tied together by a river and a culture and a grit and a spirit of entrepreneurship and joy that drives us. We are determined and driven and courageous people. We're also bound by an age-old narrative that holds us back in many ways, that the courage to sit in the discomfort around can move us. It can help us find that new next level of understanding, that new next level of awareness. And that is my hope for every time I am invited into discomfort. You see, I grew up in Detroit. I was born in 1967, which tells you a little bit how old I was, but also that I was born in the center of the civil uprisings in Detroit in 1967. And we've unfortunately not seen as much change across the country as we need or should see. And so, today is about invitations to the value and the power of X. For me, it's about an invitation for you to join me in your own discomfort. That doesn't have to be about race or inequity. It can be about a million things. The world needs us to be uncomfortable. The world needs us to dismiss the way we think about things. The world needs us to ask questions that we're afraid to ask. The world needs us to hear answers that we are not prepared to hear. The world needs us to know that we don't know everything we think we do, and that even at the ripe old age of 48, we can continue to invite discomfort into our lives. Moving to Memphis was about discomfort. He said it. It was uncomfortable. I asked my entire family, all of whom are seated here today, thank you very much, to join me here in this place, this mid-southern city that is hotter than anyone in the world could ever believe, is complicated and amazing and challenging in so many beautiful ways, and they did. So this invitation just isn't about me, it's about all of the people I've come to know and love who have willingly joined me in this discomfort in pursuit of a higher and greater understanding, in pursuit of our own increased awareness of how we can behave in this community as better, well-informed citizens. And so, in spite of all of that discomfort, we move through the world, and I hope that you will move through it with us. I hope that as you see this stool sitting beside me, you will think about the opportunities that you're faced with on a daily basis to be the voice in a room that challenges things that are being said by folks. I hope that you will be willing, when invited, to sit very uncomfortably in this seat when someone tells you something you didn't expect, or maybe tells you that you've disappointed them or taken them down a path that you weren't planned to take. I hope that you will allow the value of this seat to help you seek justice and reason and truth and explore your passions in ways that you haven't heretofore even imagined. I hope then that as we've all sat through this glorious discomfort, you realize I don't think the end of the story is sad. I think it's happy and bright and filled with abundance and opportunity and access. If only as we move through to the other side, we behave differently. One of my biggest struggles with economic development in our country today is that we keep doing the same stuff and expecting different outcomes. Once you've sat here and spent time in the reality of another person's pain or discomfort, you can't anymore accept what we've been doing all along as good enough. Whether we're talking about economic development, transportation, education, access to fresh and healthy food. If it's not working, we are obliged to challenge the status quo, to recognize this discomfort as the thing that can drive us and move us to the other side. So, after lunch, after hearing speakers that are far better prepared than me, or far more experienced than me, I hope that you will recognize that through these shaking legs of discomfort, an expression of this story, that you are invited to be uncomfortable. I hope that you will let that discomfort drive you. I hope that you will let your discomfort with any of the things I've said drive you. I hope you will realize that I knew I may say things that you didn't like or made you uncomfortable or made me uncomfortable, but that's sort of the point, right? Until it's good enough, we can't just simply sit in our own imagined comfort and think it's enough. We can't. And so, if there are things I've done that have made you uncomfortable, you're sitting in it. And if there are things that I've done that will ultimately make me uncomfortable, I will sit in it. But I am willing to be imperfect in the discovery of all of the things we know we need to know to make this a just, inclusive, and wonderful universe. And I know that each of you are willing to join me there. So as we end today, I want to know if you'll sit. If you'll just sit for a moment in the discomfort of whatever it is you're learning that's making you uncomfortable. And I want to know if you'll let that discomfort guide you. Thank you.